Hey,
Hey, Paul, how are you?
good. How are you, Chelsea?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on with us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I've actually known Paul in the past. I was an assistant coach at Tufts Tennis, and Paul has been the coach for a long time at Bates, coaching both the men's and women's program. Long history there. How long have you been there, Paul?
Well, I was an undergrad there, so 4 years as a student athlete, and I just completed my 24th year as head coach of men's and women's tennis.
Awesome. So I have some questions for you today. We're going to be talking tennis and we're going to be talking mindset. And I definitely want to hear about your program. Any prospective students, listen up because this is one of the guys to listen to. First off, just tell me a little bit about Bates. What makes Bates special in terms of your tennis program? Your Division 3 and kind of at the top there. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, appreciate you having me on today. I think over the years we have built a culture that prides itself in hard work, being dedicated, being selfless, sort of being devoted to each other on the team, and sort of the mindset of what can I give to my teammates, not what can I get out of this experience, but what can I give. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really the hallmark of what makes our team special. And I'm sure other teams have that as well, but it's something we very much focus on. And it's important because when you're grateful for your teammates and you're grateful for the opportunities that you have to compete and train, it's it transcends sports, right? It makes it such a special experience that I think our athletes are really willing to go through the wall for each other. They'll die for each other, and they're really good friends on and off the court. But they're willing to push each other and hold each other accountable and be honest with each other. If
Mm-hmm.
someone isn't sort of on the right path, they make sure that they're vocal about it and in a nice way. And so those are some of those fundamentals that create a strong culture, and I think it's something that is really strong with our program.
Yeah, so that was actually something I wanted to ask you about because we all realize that on a team you can have fantastic athletes and tons of talent, but if they're not coming together in that family sort of way, then there's something missing, and it's what the very best teams have. You can see it, you can feel it when you go to the matches, and I know that your team has that. So I understand that it is, that family feeling, and that they feel like they would do anything for their teammates, and that is what we're going for. But how do you, as a coach, cultivate that and instill those qualities that you talked about, like the willingness to do anything for each other or fight for each
Mm-hmm.
other? So is there anything that you're doing outside of picking out great recruits that seem to already exhibit those qualities? Is there anything that you guys do team building wise, or is there anything that you're doing in terms of off court sessions to instill those qualities on your team?
Yeah, when you're building a team, I think you incorporate all those things. Team building, is important, but I think it's not so much that we have to schedule those things. They tend to want to be with each other when they have off time.
Yeah.
But we do team activities, and we do like something that's tough that they might not think they want to do. We took a 5 mile hike up a mountain a couple years ago with the men's and women's team, and we loaded up the vans. They knew we were going to hike a mountain, but they didn't really know the surprise. And I had bought there was 24 of us. I bought 24-gallon jugs of water. I had a big like marine cooler, like fishing cooler that weighs about 40 pounds when it's empty. We put some ice in there in the lunch. And then we had this huge, like 15-foot PVC, pipe half filled with water that's,
Okay.
hard to handle. And so we got out of the vans and I said, listen, this is a team building exercise today, that all these items right here that you see in front of you, once we pick them up, they can never touch the ground until we get to the top of the mountain. And they looked at me like I was crazy, but my objective was not to tell them how to do it, but to let them figure it out on their own. Because of course I had two big guys that could be, fullbacks on a football team, and they're like, oh, we got the cooler, and we
all the way up the mountain.
Go for it. So, 100 yards in, they're like, my arms are falling off. Like, what are we doing here? And so it was really neat to see how they worked as a team. And, they started, going 4 on the cooler and switching off. Who's got, someone take my bottle, I'll get the cooler. Who's got the pipe, and all the way up the mountain for 5 miles. And it was not an easy hike. And then we got to the top and we had lunch and got to discard, the water that we weren't drinking, and make the load a lot lighter for the trip down. But then at the top, we just talked about, what is it that made this experience challenging, and how did we overcome it as a team? And it was really neat to see the dialogue back and forth. And they were like, yeah, and they still talk about this trip, this hike. It's like, yeah, we hated it at the beginning. We absolutely hated this. But now we look back and even at the end of the hike, they were like, you know what, this was really useful. And it was a good tool to teach us how to improvise and how to adjust and how to help each other, even though we were doing something that we didn't really want to do.
Right. I love that. That's awesome. And it's kind of a parallel to also, 6 a.m. workouts, that's another one of those just really unpleasant things as an athlete at the time, but is really a bonding experience. And maybe it is something that you're sitting around complaining about at dinner, but it brings you together as a team. And the coach knows that we're you're no dummy. Like you know that.
100%. It's about, being a coach is about pushing the boundaries and making sure that, as your athletes are out of their comfort zone and prepared for those tough third set matches, because they've been through some tougher practices. Like, practice should be a lot more difficult than a match. And that's how we try to run our practices. We really make them demanding, really intense, no messing around. And we talk about, when we enter practice, that's our sacred space. And, so they arrive and they're milling around and putting their sneakers on and shoes or whatever. But then once we get into dynamic, we enter the court space, it's, a different vibe. They're all business, and it's a serious time. And it doesn't mean they're not going to have fun training hard, but there's no messing around. And it's their responsibility, each teammate's responsibility, to be the best practice partner, the best competitor for their teammate that day. Because if they're not pushing each other that way, we never reach, the best level we can get to, right? So it's all about, so-and-so, really pushing their teammate, and then, hey, it's a struggle today, and this is the difficult opponent, or I'm not having an easy day, but it's what helps them kind of grab, deep inside, another level, and helps them to know that they can do that in a tough match. And so, we talk about this every day. If you're not, if your goal isn't to beat up on your practice partner that day, you're not doing your job. And so it's really important that they do it out of love, and they know that, hey, my responsibility is to push you. So this is not like you're my friend, but you're going down today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's essential on a tennis team. It's such a sport where we have to be able to push each other, and we have to be able to leave it on the court and then be able to go hang out afterwards and be friends and not take anything personally, even if I'm getting fired up on the court while I'm, you know, practicing against you. So that's huge. And one thing that you said that just kind of stuck in my mind is that it's an everyday thing. This is a culture and a thought process coming from the top down from you that you're instilling on a daily basis. It's not like you have a talk once a year or twice a year with your team and say, this is how it's going to be. And, you know, hope that they follow. Instead, it's every day you're bringing up the specific points about the culture that you want to create and hard work and dedication. We're going to push, we're going to be all business, we're going to grind, and this is how it's going to be. And you're bringing that up every day. And I think that's the key. It's not a one day thing. That was something that I remember from my coach at Bucknell. I mean, Rebecca Held is one tough cookie, and she is like, no, like, you are going to be all business. I remember, I think I gave her a bad look one day, and she was like, oh no. So,
Well,
yeah,
it's about
I mean, it's
holding
something
them.
that comes from the top.
It's about holding your athletes accountable and being consistent. And, you know, we have certain policies and the way we do things. And, you know, when you play a match, you never have a ball on the court. So if they're playing points and they hit a first serve in the net, you know, how many juniors hate to go move that ball? Yeah. But no, I mean, why do the pros have ball people? Like, it's a distraction. It's dangerous. Like, move the ball, be professional, go move the ball. And, you know, if they don't, we're running sprints, the whole team.
Right.
You know, same thing. If any negativity, and it's not that, you know, I'm this like evil, like overlord here, but it's, you know, it's like their badge of courage. They know that if someone screws up, they're running as an entire team, and they learn to curb their mentality pretty quick. So, you know, if someone's negative or does anything like slam a ball or just, you know, body language, it could be a subtle negative body language or self-talk that's negative. Everyone's on the line, and we're doing a court sprint, and it's cumulative. So the next time it's 2 courts, the next time, and this is throughout the whole season, the next time is 3, the next time is 4. So they learn pretty quick that, you know, this is important to us, and this is a really being positive and is how you win. And if you're negative, there's no place for it. And they learn pretty quick to change that. So.
Yeah. Negativity can be pretty detrimental as a player on the court. One bad point turns into 3, 4, a game, a set. And that spiral can happen super fast. And so if you're not nipping that in the bud in practice, then it's, you know, not going to be any different in a match. Just some of the things that you're talking about just parallel so well to the way that we train our athletes. Obviously, we're working with a lot of juniors. We do work with adults as well, but, you know, developing an accountability system for themselves. So, right. You know, and we get it to come from them. So it's like, okay, well, you realize that you're being negative on the court, and you know that's affecting you. So what are you going to do the next time that you do that? What is the penalty? And you're going to do that and put that on yourself. And we also come up with some of these adversity scenarios, like, you know, somebody yelling during your point, or somebody being distracting or trash talking, or, you know, you got to come from 2-5 down, and, you know, you got 10 people watching you. So how can you create some situations in practice that mimic some stressful situations in matches, so that, you know, you're more prepared going in to those situations when you do get to college, and when you are playing for a team where it does matter.
And college tennis is a little crazy. It can be very rambunctious, and the fans are loud and obnoxious. And, you know, one of the things we talk about is, you know, no excuses, like thrive on adversity, enjoy the struggle. Those are some terms we use, because whoever deals with the adversity better on that day will win. And so we spend a lot of time, you know, talking about having affirmations. So after a point, win or lose, you use the same affirmation as something that gives you strength. It's something that you're familiar with, and you repeat that over and over. So it helps you get stronger as the match goes on, versus negative self-talk. It'll just be a downward spiral. And so we have to, create that muscle memory in our brain of like, okay, after a point, this is what I do. I say this, and everyone has their own particular mantra or affirmation that they use. But
That's an example of one, Paul. I mean, we call that, having go-to positive affirmations. And so just give me an example maybe of one or two of your players and what they actually use after, say, a battle point or a lost point.
they tend to use the same one all the time, and it's individual to them, but we'll have, like, Anna will say, this is my court. And it's just a position of strength. Like, hey, I don't care what you do. This is my court. And then we'll have, another player might just say, I'm strong. I got this. And so by being positive and pumping yourself up, just like you would for your doubles partner, right? It's amazing how good people are at lifting up their doubles partner, but then sometimes in singles for themselves, they have a really hard time being that way with themselves. So we talk about be your own best doubles partner, and talk to yourself that way. And then just using systems of, before and after the point, it's like, the typical, like, switch your racket, but we go to a towel. We have team towels, and with Bates tennis on them. And that's also something that gives them strength, because they use it all the time between points, on changeovers. We also do a lot of work on meditation and visualization. So the breathing techniques that we practice as a team and that they do individually, just doing that cleansing breath after a point will really ignite those, the muscle memory, and get the nervous system to do what you want it to do. And, it's really, really helpful, but they have to do the work. We ask them to do 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night, where they just breathe and they meditate for a minute or so, and then they just continue breathing and really visualize themselves. Maybe they're working on something technical. Maybe they're working on a certain type of point construction, or maybe they're trying to, get through, hey, I'm having a hard time closing out the set when I'm up serving for it. And they see themselves over and over, feel themselves playing the way they want to play, playing their best tennis. And so I think they don't always buy in right away. It takes a lot of repetition and practice, but the ones who do, and eventually everyone does, it makes a huge difference. Visualization is such a powerful tool. And that's something we use between points, on changeovers.
Yeah. So a couple of things you mentioned there. Number one I heard was just, being your own best partner. So sometimes I say to my clients, would you pay a coach to speak to you the way that you speak to yourself? And usually the answer I get is, no, I would fire them. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I would totally fire that coach. And so, all right, well, you can't fire yourself. So you're going to have to come up with something there. And a lot of times that confidence killer is more of like, okay, I actually need to just realize that this is actually a big deal and is impacting me in a negative way. And I think that a lot of people think they can be like John McEnroe and like swear, get mad at the ref, and still turn it into something positive. And I just don't know anybody else other than him that's ever been able to do that.
And he'll admit to this day, and he'll admit now that if he did a better job with that, he might have, had an easier time in some matches.
Yeah, he may have been even better. And then, another thing you mentioned was the towel. And so that's, a lot of your players are using that as a routine, which is so great. And it's one of those hidden confidence uplifting things that a lot of athletes don't realize how important it is to have that routine and have it really set and also to have your script set, like
Mhm.
what you're going to say. I know I always used to say like, all right, I'm going to control the point, because a lot of times I would kind of sit back if I didn't think I was going to control the point, then I would like almost let the point happen to me and I would go into more of a reaction mode. So I was always like, I got to control the point. I'm going to control the next point. So that was one that I used when I was playing a lot. And then another thing that you brought up later was just the, you said something about consistency at the end, and just making sure that they're consistently visualizing and making this a practice. So they're not doing it like once when they're really struggling. It's like actually something that's built in every day or every other day or a couple times a week even, I mean, that's enough. But you're not just randomly going, oh, okay, I think I'll try visualizing today and see if that works.
Mhm.
It's like, it's a practice. And so it's really like your mindset on your team and what you're instilling in those guys and girls is like, okay, this is really a commitment to a way of thinking and a way of training off the court.
Exactly. So you have, everyone, has strength and conditioning coaches. Everyone, spends a lot of time on that and flexibility training and all that. Well, in a sport like tennis, and every sport, I think, but tennis especially, because you're by yourself, and you have an opponent trying to disrupt you. If you're not super strong mentally and emotionally, you're going to have a tough time. And a player who is really solid and is a fighter and is positive will often overtake a player who's much more skilled,
Right.
because they just have that it factor, and they persevere when things are tough. And that's something that we take pride in, and that's something that we work really hard at.
Yeah, that's so important. So important. So, um, my next question for you was, obviously you are instilling this on your team. Is there anything that you are looking for in a recruit? Are there any qualities that you're looking for in the girls and guys that you bring onto your team? Are there any major things?
Well, I mean, we're looking for obviously like great people first, and then I know that seems like a no-brainer, but I will never like sacrifice that. If it could be the best recruit I've ever had, if they don't fit our mold and our culture, it's not worth it, because it will destroy our culture. And we've had to part ways with players that didn't come around, not too many times, but it's happened. And I think the other biggest ingredients I'm looking for are the work ethic and the joy. They absolutely love to train. They love this sport. They're gym rats. I call them. Like, we have some really good student athletes, and they're very good in the classroom, but they love to train and they love to get better at their craft. So I'm looking for athletes who are not necessarily finished developing, but that are really athletic and they're gamers. I want people who are going to fight and compete, because it's easy to teach the game. It's easy to teach strategy and patterns and all that stuff. But if someone has a lot of heart and they know how to compete and they fight for every point, then it makes my job so easy. So those are the ingredients that we're looking for.
Yeah, I love the term gamer. It's it sounds like, yeah, they're willing to put the work in. And I think also just the way that also comes off to me is an athlete that knows they don't have it all figured out and has sort of more of a, I'm not saying that they're not talented, but just that they're not fully developed, like you said. Because how could you possibly be fully developed at 18 years old? You would think that you're going to get better over time, and just having that open mind to a new coach with new ideas and having a growth mindset going into that, instead of thinking, eye of my game. I know what I'm doing. I'm already kind of done with
Exactly.
my development.
I think growing up, my dad taught me how to play, and he gave me this great foundation. But I didn't really have an opportunity to work with like amazing coaches, and I had to teach myself a lot. I had to just listen to my friends' coaches, and But when I got to work with my first professional coach, Buddy Schultz, who's a Bates alum, after college, my game shot through the roof, and all of a sudden I had this information, but I had to be open to it, and I think that's what I'm looking for in my players is that mindset of like, I can learn from anyone. I'm willing to try
Right.
something once and then add these pieces to my game. And that's what we talk about all the time in our development. We do, a lot of individuals, 2 a week with each player. And, we ask them to come to the table with like, okay, after doing an inventory after the last match or practice, like, what is it that you want to get more comfortable with? What will make a difference in your game? And so they're part of that development. It's not just me telling them. They have to, really be honest with themselves and say, no excuses, but if I can learn how to do this better, I can beat that type of opponent. And I think over my career, I was able to, take bits and pieces from a lot of different coaches and incorporate it into one system. But I'm still open to learning new things, like learning from you today and learning from, every coach I listen to. I love talking shop with other coaches and just picking their brain because, going to a convention or whatever, some people say, well, I've heard that before, but maybe you pick up something a little bit different this time. And that's why I love doing camps where, there's a lot of head coaches and they're making presentations. And to me, it's as much of an education for me. And I'm always adding, bits and pieces to how I go about my work as a coach.
Yeah. I mean, coaching in general gets really boring if you think you know everything. And so does athletics, and being an athlete, yourself, it just gets boring. If you think you're done, that's when you quit. Right. So, that's one of the reasons why we're doing these sort of what we're calling meeting of the mind sessions is our company believes in a growth mindset. So again, like you said, we can learn from anybody. And if we pick up, some gold nuggets from you or from some other great coaches that we want to talk to, then, we're only becoming better at what we do. And so it's not all about us telling everyone else how to approach mindset. It's like, okay, well, what could I take from Paul to incorporate into our program? And then we all meet together and come together and say, oh, we learned this or that from so-and-so. And it's awesome because you feel like you're continuously growing and learning. And that's essential as an athlete too, you have to have that growth mindset of, I am going to learn for basically the duration of the time that I'm going to decide to play this sport. And so that's
what makes it
huge.
Exciting. It makes it exciting, right? If I can get better every day, I can find, and we use the term win the day. If I can win the day, and whether it's on the court or off the court, find a way to get better, function better on the campus, be a better tennis player, be fitter, get more rest, whatever it is that helps you win that day, down the road, that will have a positive and an exponential effect on your development and your performance. So,
yeah. All right. So I have one more question. So we can instill the culture, we can instill the mindset. I can do that with my own athletes. I've done it with myself. I've basically been studying sports psychology and all of this stuff since I got out of college, majored in psychology. I've kind of dedicated a lot of time to this, yet still things happen here and there. Right. And I want to just touch for a second on the topic of a mental block, because it was something that I remember going through in college, as a tennis player. And I got to a point, where I couldn't hit a forehand to save my life. And it was very mental. It wasn't
Oh, totally.
physical. It wasn't like I didn't know what I was doing. I even got to a point where I wasn't even sure where my grip was on my forehand or exactly how I held the racket. Like that's how
In your
doubting
head. Yeah.
I got. And I just ran around. I like spent 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 matches. I don't know how many it was. It was a good chunk of matches where I just had to like run around my forehand, not hit it. And I've seen actually it's not like I'm the only one. I'm speaking from,
No.
I think a lot of tennis players, they go through periods where, every once in a while, one of the strokes just kind of, where is it? Right. And
Right.
so, have you ever seen that before in your 20 plus years at Bates? And what did you do?
Many times. And, I call it a junior mentality. And I'd done it before myself. I remember coming off and I'd won the match. It was a semifinals match in a money tournament. And, I felt like my backhand was not in sync that day. I was talking to a gentleman who was a mental coach for one of my friends. And he said, wow, amazing match. And I said, well, no, my backhand's not, it's off. He goes, there's nothing wrong with your backhand. And he said, look me in the eye and tell me that there's nothing wrong with my backhand. And I thought that was funny, but it was a way to acknowledge, that the words we use are powerful, right? And the thoughts that we use are powerful. So they become self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you think there's something wrong with your forehand, there's going to be something wrong with your forehand.
Yeah.
But how do you get out of that was the question. So number one, stop saying there's something wrong with your forehand. And that's how I always dispel it with our athletes. I say, look, you've hit 1 million forehands in your life. It's impossible. It cannot go away. Your muscle memory is there. Generally, the reason is, your vision, you got to see the ball better and you got to move better and get comfortable so you can hit that ball. So make it about something that you can control, your vision and your movement, not something that's just out there in the atmosphere, right? Like what's wrong? Like something happened, nothing happened. So, and then you go to work and, my coach did this for me my first year in college. Same thing. I could not hit an overhead. It could be the easiest overhead. I missed every one for a month. And my teammates laughed at me and they made fun of me. And I was the number one player, but I could not hit an overhead. So my coach came out and he said, hey, let's just hit 200 overheads. And he fed me lobs, nothing special. And I worked it out. And I proved to myself that there was nothing wrong with my overhead. So the same thing, it takes work. How do you gain confidence? You can tell yourself and use the right positive language, but you can't fake confidence. So how do you get it? You go practice and you have someone feed you balls, or you go hit 1,000 forehands and you work through it. And then you understand that, hey, I control this. I control my approach. I control my attitude. And this is how I'm going to go about this. And there's nothing wrong with my forehand or my overhead. I'm going to find a way. And so you take the athlete who is in this mind space of like, there's something out of their control. Like, oh my God, this is happening to me. Where did it go? And you just spell it and you just say, okay, so this is how we're going to deal with this. And you might work on a technique a little bit, but it's just more reps and getting them to understand that, no, everything's fine. It didn't go away. I just thought it did, so.
Yeah. And I think a big piece of that comes, could be potentially fixed on the earlier side, and we don't have to go down that rabbit hole if our self-awareness is so high that, I hit a few, whatever the case may be, let's say it's backhand, my backhand doesn't feel good for a few shots. Then my brain starts saying things like, oh, I can't hit a backhand today. So if I can stop right there, right, and go, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Like almost like that's another person.
Right.
Like that's like the little devil on my shoulder saying that.
Exactly.
And I can be like, no, go away. That's actually not the case.
Right.
And I just need to feel it out a little bit. And, my backhand is awesome. It's always been awesome. It's
Mm-hmm.
been one of my go-to shots. Start saying all of the positives, or even focus on like, your footwork, or like you said, your movement, so that you're just not overthinking it. And you're just kind of work through that groove. And that way you don't actually get into that spiral, but it takes such a level of athletic self-awareness that I think oftentimes doesn't develop. Like you said, it's a junior mentality.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't develop until a little bit later. And sometimes it doesn't develop until out of college, which is not too late, but it's, it'd be better for sure if you had that level of self-awareness a lot earlier, so that you didn't fall into those traps. Because I think that a lot of athletes start, we call them cognitive distortions. Like, you're really distorting reality here and saying,
Exactly.
like, you hit 2 or 3 bad backhands and now you're saying you can't hit a backhand to save
Mm-hmm.
your life. Well, you just assigned that mental script to that
Right.
scenario, when really you maybe were off center a couple of shots and your eye was off the ball, or you weren't focused enough, or whatever the case may be, that was the
Mm-hmm.
actual reality. And now you have made this decision. So then it's like this spiral effect of, oh my gosh, where it is. And like you said, it's a what's happening to me, and who outside of me can tell me what's wrong so that I can fix it, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how can we not go down that road in the first place? But yes, I think there are, for sure, like, yeah, work it out with a coach, and you can do those things once, but if
Mm-hmm.
only if you get to that point where you've allowed it to go down
Right.
that far.
I think in the moment, though, it's a very challenging, in a match where you get adrenaline going and all that. And you even see some pro players act like that and, throw their hands up in the air and like, what's going on today? And they allow themselves to think that they should be flawless when, we're all human beings and we're all going to make mistakes. And so what we stress with our athletes is, well, what do you control? What adjustments can you make reference point wise? So we're not thinking technique in the middle of a match. There's a lot of athletes who have been given so many lessons, private lessons, that they have to think of every little piece of the swing. And I'm trying to get them to think more holistically and use visualization to see a shape that they're trying to hit and actually feel that on the way to the ball, so that it sort of creates a blueprint and your muscle memory is there and it takes care of itself. If I'm hitting, a bomb tee serve and I keep missing it 6 inches to the right, don't be stubborn and just aim, a foot to the left. And on that day, like, it's weird. Sometimes that happens, and that day you fixed it, and you just have to go with the flow and be willing to adjust your reference points and not expect it to be perfect. I think that's the mistake a lot of players make, is they've trained really hard and they have expectations, and expectations can be super heavy. The only thing we expect, and we talk about this all the time, is we don't control the winning and the losing, but we control our approach and our effort and our hustle and all those, the perseverance, all that stuff. We control those things, and then the winning comes from that. And guess what? You're not going to win every match. Federer doesn't win every match, and Murray doesn't win every match, and Nadal. And guess what? They hate to lose to each other, but they also respect each other because they know they left everything on the court and they did their best. And that's all you can do as an athlete. You're not going to win every contest. So.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing that you said about, athletes sometimes the player gets into the match and they start thinking technique, and that's typically paralyzing. And in my experience, it really is of no help at all to think about technique in the middle of a match, unless it's super, super simple or something that you can really feel. And it's funny because, I give a lot of lessons still, and, I'll be working with somebody on something and we do have to talk technique,
Sure.
in a lesson. And I get the question of, well, what should I do in the match and this and that? And my answer is always the same. And I say, look, I really would rather you not think about this. I think it's going to naturally come in when the time is right.
Mhm.
And so, if there's one little key word that maybe helps you holistically approach something a little bit better, and you can stay in the feeling zone, then
Exactly.
that works. But what doesn't work is to think, put my arm here, put my elbow there.
Right.
It's too it's just paralyzing,
Mhm.
and from what I've seen. And I think a lot of players have that question. They're like, how can I incorporate what I'm learning on the court in private lessons, and how can I translate them to matches? And I really think that's
The
something you
big,
shouldn't really worry about too much.
no.
Just keep going to the lessons. It takes time. I usually see it happen in about 8 lessons. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, we hit that 8 lesson mark of working on the same thing, and then it starts to
Breakthrough.
become
Yeah.
more natural.
Yeah.
So
Well, we use the phrase, trust your training. So we work really, really hard. And when you're out there on the court in the match setting, let it fly. I don't
yeah,
want them being careful. I want them, being smart and doing the right things and aiming to safe targets, but we are never going to be careful. We're going to let it rip. And, that's a tough mindset to get to for someone who, all our athletes invest so much and they want to control that part. They want to, I put in all this work. So it should work today. Well, you got to just trust that it will and not worry about that. So,
yeah. I mean, when have you ever seen an athlete play their best tennis when they were being tentative and tight?
yep.
It just doesn't happen that way. But like you said, I think it really takes a lot of work to get to that point, um, because we do know that the name of the game is get one more ball in play. So it's kind of like, I really want to make sure I'm making my shots, but at the same time, I want to be aggressive. And like you said, targets have a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
But I think it also comes from, like you said, just being a coach that they feel like, all right, if I put in my max effort, I have a good attitude, and I'm aggressive, then coach and my team are going to be happy with my performance. Those are the things I can control. And so therefore, because I know I have that
Mhm.
support system behind me, I therefore can do that, instead of thinking like, they're going to be mad at me if I
100%. Yeah.
lose. So you
You
have to
can't,
be that coach too.
you can't have it both ways. You cannot uh, ask them to be free and to use a new shot that they have or a new pattern or something you've been working on if you get on them when they screw up,
Right.
right? It's got to be a positive reinforcement. And that's something they look at me like I have two heads sometimes when they miss a shot. I'm like, yes, that was it. And they're like, but I lost the point. I missed the shot. I said, yeah, but it was the right approach and it was the right technique. It was exactly the right time to do it. And so you're constantly trying to reframe how they have been coached or how they talk to themselves, and to understand that, yeah, you can lose a point and you can miss a shot, but you can have exactly what you need, to progress from there and do it again. Like, don't back off because you messed up one time. It was the right play. And my athletes, it takes them a while to understand that, wait, coach isn't upset when I made that mistake. But I do get upset if they're getting on themselves. So like I said,
Yeah.
I'm freeing you up, so you cannot do that. So it's
Yeah.
one of those, and that's where I think they definitely trust me. And I'm very demanding and very much hold them accountable. But, as long as they're giving it their all and they have the right mindset, then we're in good shape.
Yeah. What about the difference between the girls and the guys? Like, I know we need to wrap up, but I'm just interested, is there a major difference in, themes that you see in mindset on the girls and the guys side?
I mean, how do I say this diplomatically? I think um, most people will agree that uh, a lot of our female athletes are much further along in emotionally and in terms of, you know, this, their mentality, they're willing to do these things that I ask them to do. Sometimes the guys think it's hocus pocus at first. And I think it's just, you know, that's the biggest difference.
But then you get the buy-in.
Yeah, I get the buy-in, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But the difference is the guys, I think, sometimes will be overly aggressive and, you know, try to be shot makers versus the women. I'm trying to get to do that more,
Right.
you know, depending on the athlete. And sometimes they're focused on, you know, just being super steady. And the guys, it's the opposite. I'm like, no, you have to be solid here. You can't hit a 120-mile-an-hour passing shot from 10 feet off the court. You have to hit a lob there, you know. And it's just like, I don't know, like just the way we're built, I think is, you know. But I always talk about, you know, the golfer who, you know, in tennis, we can screw up a lot and still win. In a golfer, if they make one bad decision because they, you know, they think they're better than they are, or they can thread the needle between two trees, when really the smart play is just chip it out and, you know, be down a shot that hole. In tennis, we can get away with a lot of stupid decisions and still win.
That is true.
I always say, like, you know, but if we can minimize those, if we can, you know, really understand our balance and hit the best shot for that situation. And sometimes, you know, just understanding, was I offensive, was I neutral, or was I defensive in that situation, and making the right shot selection based on that, and getting them to coach themselves along in the match using those factors. I think they start to get smarter, and you know, on the guy's side, it definitely, you know, it takes a couple of years, but once they're there, you know, they're a lot more successful. And on the women's side, it's honestly just trying to get them to attack and get to the net. And, you know, we have players that do it right away and they're successful. And it's just a facet of the game that isn't used a lot in a lot of junior tennis, but it's something that's, you know, very effective. But it can be scary. It can be scary at first because it takes a while. It takes a couple of years to really own that and feel comfortable with that. But they all do it, and they all become an all-court player and finish at the net, which is really cool. So.
Yeah. No, I see those patterns too. I just thought it was interesting. Certainly not, you know, all the time. And I've seen some super, super aggressive shot making type of girls, and I've seen some super steady guys, of course. But I think that we could learn from each other on that for sure. I know that I was always a player that was just, I was going to get every single ball back, but it was like pulling teeth to get me to go for it. And until I kind of got later in my college career, it was like junior, senior year when I started to get more aggressive. And that was, you know, something that was really missing and that I really needed to develop a lot earlier. And so that is, though, I mean, clearly a mindset thing. You know, that's definitely a fear of missing that's causing that. And like you said, sometimes that attack mode and the willingness to come forward, it does take some time to develop that and to understand a strategy, first of all, but also to understand, you know, your own targets and strengths and weaknesses in your shot making ability. But it does, like, if you don't start that when you're, you know, if you're not starting that when you're 14 and you're starting it when you're 18, you're going to be halfway through college before you before you're really comfortable attacking from inside the baseline, mid-court, and forward. And so if it's like, force yourself. And as much as I want to say there's a lot going on off the court, but I mean, a piece of the mindset training is, all right, how do we need to change the way that you're training so that you become more confident? So that would be a piece where if I had a mental coach in high school, that would be a piece where they would be saying, hey, you should be starting to learn how to attack right now, and really putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and situations where you're gonna lose points, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And so like forcing yourself to go do that. And so that's a piece of mental training, is having someone that's like telling you, hey, you need to go do this and change the way that you're practicing right now. But that self-realization, or that realization from the athlete, oftentimes you need a coach to be pointing that out. You know, if you're just playing, that doesn't always happen that way.
You need a coach that's confident enough that they're not worried they're going to lose you if you start to lose some matches. And
you start to lose, yeah.
I think, Roger Federer pointed it out after he won Wimbledon a couple of years ago, and he said, he called out the whole coaching world, and he said, I'm still winning these because everyone's one-dimensional. I can come in and finish at the net, and most people can't, and they're not being trained to do that. And that's something I've always done because it transformed my game after college. It's something I worked on a lot, and it made me a vastly improved player to be able to come forward and finish at the net. And it's something it's sort of a gift I've tried to give to every single player I've worked with over the years, because I think it just adds another dimension that applies so much pressure. And you're not going to win every point, but it's huge. Yeah.
And it's super fun too.
Yeah.
It's actually more fun to be able to do that. Well, Paul, I so appreciate you coming on with us. If somebody was watching this and wanted to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Well, the Bates website is easily accessible. My email is also on the Bates website. But just hit us up and fill out a recruit questionnaire. But this was a pleasure, and really enjoyed talking with you today, Chelsea. Humbled that you asked me to do this. I listened to Gene's weekly podcast, and I love it. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Paul. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
Bye.